PBS is one of the founders of the trans child abuse industry, all while taking taxpayer money. Brainwashing and transing children is an issue so hated by parents across the country that it was a driving force in the landslide Republican and Trump victory in the 2024 election cycle and presidential race. The news that these entities produced is either resented or increasingly tuned out and turned off by most of the hardworking Americans who are forced to pay for it. They no longer view NPR and PBS as trusted news sources. As a matter of fact, with these people, they're a threat. In fact, when Elon Musk put his hand over his heart and extended it and told the American people his heart goes out to them, PBS News posted the clip, called it a fascist Nazi salute, and described how it was similar to the same Heil used by Nazis at their victory rallies. Not once did PBS or NPR report on the numerous accounts of Democrats making the same gesture. AOC, Kamala Harris, Barack Obama, Elizabeth Warren, somebody that lost a presidential race, Hillary Clinton, Governor Tim Walz. Why wasn't this treated exactly the same way? Is there not a standard in journalism today? Apparently not. The United States is $36 trillion in debt. In fiscal year 2024, the government spent over $1.8 trillion more than it took in. And in fiscal year 2025, the interest on our debt is expected to exceed $1 trillion. As we continue investigating waste, fraud, and abuse, and we can look no further than the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the LGBTQ indoctrination of our children, the systematic racism narrative, and the support for censorship being pushed by the heads of NPR and PBS are just several of the many abuses of taxpayer dollars. And if you are one of the select few who might support such content, you can personally support and fund it with your own money through private donations, because the reality is the United States of America is broke and can't afford it. And after all, PBS and NPR are already fundraising off of this committee hearing.
Republicans are rubbing their hands together at the thought of punishing news organizations that they deem to be un-American.
I have a problem with that because you get federal funds. And I do believe there was a role for public radio 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. But because of technology today, I don't think there's a role for public radio anymore. And I think you've abused the privilege that you had with receiving federal funds. Because these headlines here are not true. This is disinformation on some huge topics. Do you want to dispute anything that I said in the remaining 30 seconds?
Thank you, Congressman. First of all, I want to recognize your concerns. One of the first things that I did in coming in May was to beef up our editorial standards. I directed my editor-in-chief, who, by the way,
why is NPR even doing editorials?
I'm
should
so
NPR
sorry.
even do editorials?
I don't mean editorial in terms of opinion editorial.
Do you even need opinion? What does it matter with the opinion? If you're a federally funded entity that's supposed to provide the news, can you not provide the news?
Of course,
fair and balanced?
Of course, Congressman. I mean editorial standards for our journalism was to beef up our editorial practices, bringing in more editors to make sure that we have more points of view reflected in every story. I've engaged in a number of actions trying to address
and my
some of
time's
these
expired.
concerns.
I've lost confidence in public radio. I don't think, Madam Chair, they should get a penny of federal funds.
The fact that we're sitting here today talking about defunding public television is actually not funny. At a time where we can't agree on basic facts, and while the free press is under attack, we need public media like PBS and NPR more than ever. A large majority of Americans say they trust PBS. And that's exactly why extremists are trying to tear it down. Public broadcasting is a tool for education, for emergencies, and a cherished part of our national fabric. we get huge benefits from a tiny federal investment. The majority and their chairwoman should drop this attempt to silence media voices they don't like. So the message, I think, today is very, very simple. If we're going to get rid of any puppeteers, we should get rid of the one that's actually controlling Donald Trump. Fire Elon Musk and save Elmo.
It should not be surprising that the president is doing everything possible to make it more difficult for the media to hold him accountable and for the public to be informed about his reckless and illegal behavior. Yet here we are. The Republicans have actually organized this goofy hearing to try to convince the American people that PBS and NPR are, quote, domestic terrorists, or domestic threats, my apologies. Not the incompetent, unqualified Secretary of Defense who's texting war plans to journalists. But it's y'all, PBS and NPR, the American people are supposed to be worried about. You can't make this up. It's as stupid as it sounds. The American people should be worried about the president threatening to investigate NBC for treason for reporting on his felony convictions, or arresting reporters and stripping networks of their licenses for not saying nice things about him or not using Gulf of America. The Republicans' witness, Mr. Gonzalez, went so far as to suggest that because NPR and PBS reported on the murder of George Floyd, they, quote, represent a danger to our physical health as well as to civic health of our body politics. Ms. Mayor, do you think reporting on the murder of George Floyd and highlighting instances of systemic racism is a domestic threat to America?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I believe it's our responsibility to report on all issues of interest to the American public.
Thank you so much. Ms. Kerger, what about you?
I agree. I think it's important for us to report on the important news of the day.
So let's talk about the critical role of public media. During his first term, President Trump's own Department of Homeland Security highlighted the importance of public broadcasting's role in public safety. In 2018, his administration stated, quote, PBS and local public television stations play a crucial role in protecting communities by delivering essential information to individuals and first responders. These benefits are all made possible by public broadcasting stations' unique reach, reliability, and role across America, and are especially vital in rural and underserved areas. Madam Chairwoman, I would ask unanimous consent. I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the 2018
Without
report.
objection, so ordered.
And Madam Chair, I also seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the 2019 report titled Modernizing the Nation's Public Alert and Warning System from Trump's...
Without objection, so ordered.
In the report, FEMA encouraged, quote, the use of public broadcast capabilities to expand alert, warning, and communication capabilities to fill gaps in rural and underserved areas. Mr. Ullman, what's a more significant domestic threat, reporting the murder of George Floyd or dismantling most of America's emergency communication systems?
Can you please repeat the question for me, Congresswoman?
Which one is more of a threat? Reporting the murder of George Floyd or dismantling most of America's emergency communication systems?
Dismantling the emergency systems.
And isn't it true that in Barrow, Alaska is the only, isn't it true that KBRW-AM in Barrow, Alaska is the only broadcast service available in an area of more than 90,000 square miles?
That is correct. It's also the North Slope, where the majority of all the oil production that comes from Alaska takes place.
Thank you so much. And isn't it true that without these stations' broadcast, Americans in rural communities would lack access to life-saving information and public safety alerts?
That is correct.
So in your opinion, would eliminating funding for stations in rural America like WNGH, Channel 18, and the Chairwoman's District hurt Americans?
It would hurt Americans, yes.
In fact, Georgia Public Broadcasting serves as the official distributor of evacuation route information during state-ordered evacuations, and the chairwoman is here advocating to strip their funding. Look, the DOGE agenda isn't about government efficiency. It's about breeding corruption at the expense of the safety of the American people, particularly Americans living in rural or remote parts of the country. They don't care about public safety. They don't care about emergency management, and they don't care about free speech, all of which are harming American people. And to be clear, free speech is not about whatever it is that y'all want somebody to say. And the idea that you want to shut down everybody that is not Fox News is bull. We need to stop playing, because that's what y'all are doing in here. You don't want to hear the opinions of anybody else, and the Constitution states Congress shall make no law respecting or establishing of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging
The gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentlewoman's time has expired.
If there was any doubt remaining that the right's interpretation of free speech is anything but free, we now have people being hunted and incarcerated by ICE for attending pro-Palestine protests. In addition to that, Trump is requesting access to the social media accounts of green card holders, presumably to revoke their permanent resident status for un-American speech. Read that as anti-Trump speech. So far, the Trump administration has banned over 250 words, scrubbing them from federal websites. These dangerous words include women, disability, elderly, Native American, pollution, diversity, community, and H5N1 bird flu. This is all about control and silencing dissent. They're trying to dictate which words, literally, movements, and even people are allowed to exist. Elon can sig heil to his heart's content, but God forbid we call him out for it.